Hello, I'm Anne Kruger. Welcome to the program. And first up, the locust plague that's threatening to turn a bumper harvest into heartbreak for many farmers in New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria. As predicted, millions of the hoppers have now hatched and are chewing their way through anything green in their path. While damage to crops has so far been minimal, the next few weeks are critical as the locusts reach full maturity and take off. Kerry Staight reports from one of the worst affected regions in Victoria's northwest.
It's the insect invasion that has farmers across 3 states on high alert this spring.
It's amazing just to lie in bed at night trying to sleep and my mind's going at 100 miles an hour trying to work out whether I'm looking enough for locusts, whether I'm doing a good enough job in controlling what I can find, potentially what's out in the crop, and I guess potentially the loss.
And this is what's at stake.
After 10 or 12 years of fairly poor crops, and this one is just magnificent, and it's a chance to recoup all that money and all their effort, and to see, you know, this threat come upon them at the late hour that it is devastating.
I think if it all fell over now, there'd be a lot of people that probably leave the district.
Chris Douglas was one of the first farmers in Victoria to report locusts hatching on his property at Werrimull, west of Mildura. Ever since, he's been on the defensive, trying to protect his 1,200 hectares of wheat from the hungry hoppers.
Of course, I found most of them around the edges of the crops, along roadsides where there's hard ground. I go around them every day and I spray them when I can. And, you know, you knock down at this late stage, you're knocking crop down that won't come back. But I've just got to do it because the greater risk is losing it all. I don't think I'd lose it all, but, you know, with the years we've had, we actually really don't want to lose any.
This year's good growing season for crops has also provided the perfect conditions for a locust population explosion, with plenty of feed about. For farmers around here, the problem started in autumn, when swarms flew in from the north, devouring crops and pasture and laying millions of eggs. Those tiny time bombs have now hatched, and the hoppers are picking up where their parents left off.
Certainly the worst in 75 years for Victoria, and we've found over 375 bands up in the Mallee region. Those bands range from anything from 50 metres up to 1 kilometre long.
They were much more widespread than I thought they were going to be. I thought I had a couple of egg beds and then I thought, you know, I'd concentrate on them. But once I started looking, I was just finding them in new spots every day.
While many landholders in New South Wales and South Australia have been through it all before, it's unfamiliar territory for most farmers in the northwest of Victoria, like Chris Douglas.
I just had a look at the crop and found quite a few, about 80 to the square metre they were. You might have to come and do them later.
Yeah, I'll be finished here in about half an hour and then I'll come up there and spray them.
Even his father, Jim Douglas, has little experience to draw on.
In the late 40s, in the township of Werrimull, they've got a big flat area on the eastern side of the town, and they used a DC-3 Army Air Force bomber to spray that with DDT. So, and then since we've only ever had to spray them once, was in the late 90s, I think, but that's just a few. There's been nothing ever like this, no.
Efforts to control the locusts also come with extra logistical challenges in the northwest of Victoria. A dense food-producing region where dryland and irrigated farms are wedged between conservation properties and waterways.
There is a fairly high concentration of national park and other environmentally sensitive areas that we've had to deal with. So there's been some challenges there, working through areas where we're not particularly familiar with, because locust control by the Commission has only very rarely ventured into Victoria in the past 35 years.
This year, though, the state and federal agencies have launched an aerial and ground assault on locusts, the likes of which has never been seen. The Australian Plague Locust Commission is trying to minimise migration across state borders.
We're not running around completely uncoordinated and finding ourselves under severe stress with this control program, that it all is moving very mechanistically, that it all is moving very smoothly.
So basically we'll continue to work with operations to identify spray targets.
The Victorian government is spending more than $40 million on control centres, surveillance and spraying of public lands, and a chemical rebate scheme for landholders.
So we're getting across the ground, we're identifying spray targets, and we're getting the treatment on ground a lot quicker than what we were, so it's a great result through that process.
These locusts here, as you can see, have a tendency to come out of the crop or feed paddock on our right-hand side. They're moving across the track here and replacing what I sprayed last Friday.
Some farmers, like Werrimull grain grower Ian Arney, aren't giving the state government a pat on the back just yet, calling for less talk and more practical support.
We're dealing with something that is new to a lot of us, and we really don't know how they function and how to best attack them. It is just so frustrating that all they can do is say, well, private landholders, you're on your own, but we will reimburse you for the chemicals you use on your property.
We've done endless community engagement meetings right throughout with industry and the farming sector. So feeling abandonment, I can't see how, because I think we've inundated them with information and advice on what they can do.
A lot of that advice has focused on what chemicals to use and when to spray. Experts say the ideal time is halfway through the growth cycle, when the hoppers band together and start moving.
We wait until that mid-instar phase when we're confident that all of the locusts have already hatched, and we're also at the situation where the locusts are at their highest density. That means that we can apply treatment to the smallest area possible for the largest impact.
But faced with the possibility of losing their best crop in years, many farmers have been on the attack right from the start. How much time are you spending on this?
Some days maybe 1 or 2 hours, and up to 12 hours a day spraying, locating and spraying. So far too much time.
And what should you be doing?
At the moment I should be preparing for harvest. I have about 700 bales of hay still to bring in from the paddock, but I can't. I just don't have the time.
The recent cool and wet conditions have only added to the workload and worry. In some areas, it's taken twice as long as predicted for all the eggs to hatch. At the same time, the crops have been slower to ripen, remaining vulnerable to the ravenous insects.
At the risk of sounding like whinging farmers, normally this would be a perfect finish. You know, late rain, crop still green, mild finish. But with this threat around, we kind of just want some hot weather to kick it off and get into it.
Farmers will have to hold their nerves for a few weeks yet. Even the crops that are almost harvest ready are not safe. Take this wheat, for example. It looks pretty ripe, but the top of the stem is still green. And if the locusts chew through that, the head will drop off. So far, though, the damage to grain crops has been fairly minimal, with plenty of greenery closer to the ground, keeping the hoppers well fed.
The concern that we do have is that as a consequence of that protracted hatching and the lack of density in some areas of the locusts, that a lower proportion of those locusts may in fact have been treated, and so we'll end up with a higher proportion of the population going through to adult and swarming phase.
With some locusts taking off around Mildura this week, the next question is where will they go? And that appears to have the experts divided.
If there's plenty of food up in the Murray region, they will actually probably stay in that region.
It might seem strange, but these insects are actually hardwired to move. So even though the conditions where they currently are might be highly suitable to their ongoing life and also suitable to the next generation that hatch from the eggs that they lay down, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will still stay exactly where they are. Areas in the northwest of Victoria have a tendency to move westwards, so that's obviously a focal area for the Commission in its work to manage the threat to adjoining states.
I really pity where the locusts will turn up next from this area. If we don't control them here, they are a huge threat and potential risk to some other area.
All landholders have to treat locusts on their properties. Grain growers and horticulturalists clearly have plenty of incentive. But there have been complaints locusts are being left untouched on some private land, including hobby farms, abandoned vineyards and reserves.
We're really concerned about what happens around us. I think we can control the locusts on our property, but I'm more worried about what flies in over the fence and comes in on the wing.
We do have compliance officers out there. If somebody does refuse to undertake the work, they will be served a notice, and if they still refuse to undertake that work, we will undertake the spraying on their behalf at their cost.
And have you had to do that at this stage technically?
No, we've been able to resolve everything by agreement, by discussing with them. A lot of the people is just simply a lack of information. They're not aware of what they needed to do.
The state government and some local councils have also been criticised for failing to control the critters on Crown land like parks and roads.
We cover 20,000 square kilometres in this municipality, and a lot of kilometres of roads and back roads, side roads, main roads, and we just haven't got the manpower to do that and do it quickly. We can do as much as we possibly can, but we just haven't got the staff.
We're not blanket spraying reserves or parks, which is a misperception that we're doing. No, we are identifying where the bands are, and we are actually spraying that band and that band only.
Up to 2 million hectares of land is expected to be treated across Australia, with authorities favouring phenitropine for crops and fipronil for pastures. Sensitive areas like parks and near wetlands are being sprayed with the same fungus organic growers are using.